Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's David and today we're going to be making some laser cut MDF terrain and a little bit of textured paint to slap on it. Let's get to it. So, laser cut MDF models have been around for quite a while and are pretty popular. Certainly really good for building your terrain setup quickly. Can be a little bit expensive, but hey, at the end of the day, they are generally good quality. I was lucky enough to have this got for me as a Christmas present by number one son. Good lad. You can't have too much terrain, and this kind of stuff does go together far quicker than if you're scratch building it. So, just because it is quick and relatively easy to do doesn't mean that you can't get a little bit more out of it than just a straight MDF. So let's get this opened up. Now this is, I'm not sure what brand it is, I'll be perfectly honest. And it says it's a quick start set. So let us choose one. I'm going to go for this one. Nice, basic, two walls, a bit of floor to join them together, or that's the way it appears to be because there wasn't any instructions. I'll show you some tricks on how to put them together and then we'll get to prettying it up later. Now, first of all, tools. Sharp craft knife. PVA glue is the preferred method of joining MDF terrain together. I'm using it neat rather than watered down. Obviously a brush to apply it with, and this is blue tack. Consider this to be an extra pair of hands. In previous MDF models that I have made, there can be some issues with fiddly bits, you know, sticking upright and falling over. So having something there just to support it while it dries properly is a really good idea. So sharp craft knife, let's get it off the sprue. Oh, and this is a flat wood file. An emery board will do just as well. The way it has been cut out, there are some little tabs, which I'll show you in just a second, and you do want to tidy those up on your model. Now in a lot of cases these just pop straight out, but I'm going to give it a wee bit of a help with the craft knife. Can take just a little bit of pressure. Sometimes you just do need to give it a little bit of a flex. Right. Okay, so you'll see there that yes, there is a little bit of a raggy bit there, and because that is going to go into there, you do want to get rid of it just so that it butts up quite properly to the wall, and that is what you use your file or your emery board for. Just give that a wee bit of a clean up. So some MDF models do have additional detail etched onto them. In this case we've got window frames there and what looks like floor tiles there, so you can tell which way it is facing. So that is obviously an outer side, and that will go together like that, and that will eventually go on like that. Okay, right, let's start getting some stuff glued. You probably do want to glue up the sides of the tabs. You don't need an excessive amount of glue, but you don't want on the top because that is going to be coming through and showing on your facing side. Okay, now see how it's a bit wobbly there? Pop that on, and that should hold it nicely in place for when we put this one on. This is actually dead easy to go together. Right, And this is the part where I always have problems. Let's join that up and slide it into place. That was dead easy. There you go. Right, I'll go and watch some TV while I do the other ones. May as well do them in a batch. And then I'll show you how to get some textured paint done while these are drying. So, textured paint. For that, you need some of this.
Dirt. This is a jar of dirt.
Yes, it is indeed a jar of dirt, dug straight out of the garden right now.
Is the jar of dirt going to help?
Well, we don't need all of it. We're going to siphon some of it off and use the smaller particulate matter, add that to paint, and that's going to give us our texture. Now, since this is dirt fresh out of the ground, we've no idea what's in there, so we had probably best get rid of some of the stuff that we don't actually want. This is my crafting sieve. This is the one that I use for sieving sawdust when I'm making flock. And we'll just get that out there. As you can see, there's roots and all sorts. We certainly don't want those. Any big stones or bits of wood, get rid of those. Break up any clumps. Right, that's probably enough to be going on with. Get it all onto one bit of paper. Back in the jar for the next step. So, I've added some water, given it a shake, and I've allowed it to settle. Now, you don't need to do the settling part because you're going to be washing it very shortly. I wanted to do this basically so that I could take a photo, like this, and show you the different layers, some of which we want, some of which we don't. Now, the top part is just dirty water. We're going to be getting rid of that. The next part down, that really dark stuff, that is very fine silt and sediment. It's too fine for our purposes. It's going to give absolutely no texture. All it's going to do is discolour your paint. So we are going to be washing that away. It is the bottom layers that we want. They are your coarser particles and they are what are going to give the texture to the paint when we add it. Depending on the soil in your area, you may also find that at the very bottom, the heaviest particles are larger pieces of grit and sand and things like that. It may be a case that you want to leave those because they're going to be too coarse for your paint, but you're only going to try that with experimentation. You'll soon get used to scraping off the bit that you want. So let's take this and give it a wash. So let's get some water running. We'll discard that dirty water because we don't want it. And add some fresh. And your heavy particles are going to stay down at the bottom, and we're just getting rid of all of that fine stuff there. And it will take quite a bit of washing out. If you're giving it a jiggle, just give it a few seconds just for the coarser grains to settle back down to the bottom again, and just keep on washing it. A little bit more, but you can see we've pretty much got all of that silt out of the way. There we go, some nice coarse grains. That's going to add texture to the paint. Now that we've separated off those coarser grains, we'll scrape it out, get it onto a plate, bang it in the oven. We're just going to heat it up, dry it obviously, but if you've got any kind of mold spores or anything like that that's still clinging to it, it's always a good idea to kill those off, otherwise it is going to eventually destroy your paint. You don't want that. I'll get on with it. By the time it's been washed and dried, there's not a great deal left of it. But if it turns out that you need more than that to give the batch of paint that you're doing some texture, then just wash another lot. After all, it's dirt cheap. Yeah, okay. Alright. Cleaned out pot. That in there. Normal household paint. Oh, it's a bit tight. I have gone for a sort of cream base on this one because, well, the colour of concrete is quite creamy. It is quite a thick paint, so we'll get some in, and there's a good chance I am going to have to water that down. Right, show the camera, and we're just going to start stirring through there. It does change up the colour a little bit, but not all that much. Good thing about using a glass jar is you can check on the bottom to see if you've got any lumps. I'll just use a spot of water just to get the last of the dirt or the texture stuff out of there. Get that in. Right. So, time for a quick test. Here is the straight paint like that, and some of our new textured paint. Oh, you can hear that, and hopefully you're going to be able to see it as well. And that's how you do the textured paint. Let's get back to the buildings. So, a nice little selection of MDF ruined buildings. I'm quite pleased with that set. I'll show you what I'm going to do next using one of the smaller ones. So we'll just move those out of the way. So there are some nice little features to these models. You can see here that there are some upright pieces to signify girders or rebar or something like that that would be used inside the concrete to reinforce it. So it adds a little bit of detail and realism, but I don't want them because I'm going to show you a different way of adding rebar to pretty your models up. Not just MDF ones, but any of the others. So we will quickly get rid of those. And I'm not too bothered about scraggy ends on top because we're going to be adding a little bit of texture. I'll get these all done, and then we need to take them outside and give them a coat of gloss urethane. We do that before we do anything else. MDF has a horrible habit of soaking up water, so if you paint directly onto it, it can absorb the water, expand, warp. That's what you don't want. I'll get cracking. Okay, outside, giving them a quick clear coat of enamel. This is just a straight plastic urethane coat. Getting the undersides first, so as not to forget them. And then a good coat on the top sides. So the urethane coat is dry on these ones. So let's get to prettying them up. First thing we'll do is add that rebar back in. Now we need a couple of things for that. First of all, drawing pin. Now rebar always looks best when it's in a logical place. So the kind of places we would be looking for would be up the sides of holes in the structure rather than above, and certainly at the corners. So we are just going to prog a hole gently because it will split on you in a couple of places. Now that we've got some holes, we need a material for the rebar. This is a twist tie. The round ones are the best. You can get ones which are the plastic is flattened, but if you've got any single core wire that has been plastic wrapped, that is ideal. So strip the end. Kids, you may need an adult to help you with that. You just roll it a little way on your craft knife like that. Get a decent amount. Pop some super glue on. Give it a snip. And the good thing about it is you can bend it into all sorts of different curvy shapes to signify you know, damage and stress and things like that. Plus, with it being plastic coated, you're not going to hurt yourself when you're using the model. I'll quickly get the rest of the rebar done and we'll move on to the next bit. So we've got the rebar in place. Now let's just add a little bit of texture to those top edges to show where concrete is broken off. I put some paper down, and the first one we're going to tackle, or the first part, are these sort of straight elevated edges. And again, my usual go-to is just watered down PVA with a dash of detergent in. I'll just get some of that on there. And then a straight sprinkle of sand, just to add some texture on there. And then for the flatter sections, I'll just go over and use some builder's sand, which is a coarser grain. And make sure you do get it around that rebar. It doesn't matter if any sticks to the rebar, because obviously the way it had been embedded in the concrete, you would have had some sticking to it in any case. Right, we'll let this dry and I'll go and do the other models in the set and do them all together. Then I'll get an undercoat of grey to tie it all together. I'm not going to show you that, you've already seen me use a spray can once this video. And then we'll apply that textured paint to the outsides. Sounds like a plan. So the undercoat's been done, it's tied together all of those different textures into one single model. But one thing that an undercoat does do, and this is the same with models like this, or even with just miniatures, it shows up far better things like mould lines on miniatures, where you've got to take a little bit more off just to tidy it up. And it also shows up gaps, and we've got some just on the corner there. In a lot of cases, hopefully your undercoat will seal those up and you can't tell that they're there. In this case it hasn't, so we're going to go back to my good old standby gap filling medium for terrain, which is Reeves Coarse Texture Gel. And all I'm going to do is just on those gaps blob a little bit on there and on there. I'm just using a piece of scrap card and skim it along. I don't mind using texture gel on this because, let's face it, we're going to be coating it with textured paint. But that should just get rid of the gaps. So, gap now filled. I'll leave that to dry, give it another quick touch up with the undercoat, and then we'll get on to the final part of painting. There we have loads of stuff ready for the final stages. All we're going to be doing is putting a couple of coats of paint on. I will once again use this one as my example. Now, first thing we're going to tackle is this textured area on top. And for that we want some of our cream paint and a drop of water, because we're going to be making an ink. Now, the reason we're doing that, and essentially an ink is just really thin down paint, as you know. Sometimes if you want to do a wash so that it gives better adhesion, you may want to add a little bit of detergent to it, but we don't want that. Just get a little bit more paint in there. Right, so very, very, very runny paint. And what we want this to do is run down the ends of the gravel and pool on the bottom so that it looks like the concrete mix is sitting there with aggregate sitting out of it. So we're just going to dab that on top, and you can see the colour of the aggregate coming through. That's exactly what we're after. So I will get on and get these painted, and we'll move to the next step. One thing that is apparent is that the inside walls are very smooth and shiny with that undercoat on. So we're just going to break that up a little bit. I've got some lighter grey paint, and I'm just going to use a paper towel, get most of it off, and we'll just use that to stipple coat that on and just break that surface up. All stippled. Now it's texture paint time. Just remember, because that sediment stuff that we used is quite a heavy material, it will sink down to the bottom of your paint, so just make sure that you do keep it stirred as you're using it. Now, just having a look here, there are some nice window frames and door frames, so I'm going to avoid those with the texture paint. So I'll start off with a small brush, outline those. As well as I'm able to, and you can see the texture coming on already. One thing that I will say is the texture paint does take a little while longer to dry because it's household paint that you're using rather than model paint, and because there is an awful lot of handling of it, I would very much recommend that you just do one side of the building so you can hold it by the other side, then wait for that to completely dry before you turn it over and move on to the next part. And once you've got it outlined, you can swap to a bigger brush. Just remember to, when you're doing the top edges, where you've got that exposed aggregate, just flick it off the end there, because you do want to blend it in with that aggregate at the top. That's not looking too bad, but if you are on your paint getting any kind of brush marks, just give it a bit of a stipple with the brush edge, and that just breaks it up nicely. Alright, I'll leave that one to dry and get on with the others. Well, I don't know what it is about this build, but it seems like a marathon. Maybe it's the fact that I've got 5 buildings on the go at once, but we are on the final stretch. Now all we've got to do is sort out the metal parts, so that is the inside floor girders and that rebar. Give them a coat of paint and a little bit of weathering and we'll be all done. So start off, and you've seen me do this before, let's just give that metal quick dry brush and then go down around and do the rebar. Then we'll start off on the rust effect, and it's going to be old rust, so we are going to be using the orange first. I'll crack on and get this done. Then, because it's old rust, let's have a dab of brown. Strax? Yes, thank you. And do the same on the... Ow! And do the same on the rebar. Say hello to the camera. Last part, some weathering, and as you can see I've changed the camera angle so that I can work right-handed and you can still see what's going on. So, a little bit of brown paint, just for rust effect, and some clean water here. And where that rebar is, we just get our clean water, get around the base of the rebar, and then bring it down in a line, and then just a little bit of brown and just run it down like that, and the water will disperse it. I'll finish off the rest of this lot and we'll wrap up. And there you have it, one set of MDF ruined buildings prettied up and ready for your war games table. Bit of dirt, bit of sand, bit of paint, bit of glue, and a couple of twist ties. That's pretty minimalist additions, if I do say so myself. Anyway, as ever, if you have enjoyed what you've seen or have found it useful, please hit the like and subscribe and share if you think that you have other people who would be interested in this kind of content. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.